Okay, now in this lesson, this is an extra lesson. It happens to be for both of my audiences. All right, now if you're taking one of my courses, this is just part of the videos that's kind of down from the original video. Okay, so you've already started into a lesson. All right, now for a lot of you, you're going to be on YouTube going, what is this? All right, now keep in mind what I wanted to do in this particular video was insert this video into another lesson that's part of my courses. It's the only way I get paid, all that sort of thing. Now, since I am a tourism professional, I've been doing the Amish and Mennonite scene for like a long time, and I can understand how to tell you guys how to visit the Amish and Mennonite people around Tennessee and other various states. Okay, so one of the questions that came up was, how do you find the Amish and Mennonite communities that you can visit? Really good question. It really is. It's one that I kind of touch on in the courses, but I really wanted to make a resource for. So the course takers are going to take this with a lot of my other lessons and stuff in the course that they purchased. And you guys that are on YouTube, I'm sorry, but you're just going to have to watch this and hopefully glean whatever you can from it, okay? But I will go through this because I don't want finances to be a barrier to anybody trying to find an Amish or Mennonite or Hutterite or whatever community. It just happens to be that since I run the Amish and Mennonite of Tennessee, website and page, and the Amish of Etheridge, that I can sort of tell everybody how to find and locate and visit the Amish and Mennonite communities, some of their stores, all that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to do now, all right? So what I want to jump into, first and foremost, how do you find the Amish and Mennonite people or places to visit? And that is Google is your friend, all right? Basically, you'll go on a Google search for whatever state you happen to live in. So if you type in Amish in Tennessee, you're probably going to find one of my pages from the Amish of Etheridge, most likely, since that's one of my bigger ones. And you're going to find some of my Facebook or social media sites where I'm talking about Amish and Mennonite in Tennessee. Now, if you live in Arkansas, whatever person like me is in Arkansas talking about the Amish and Mennonite people is going to be where you'll find this, okay? So hopefully you can find up some kind of keyword that will locate maybe an article, something from a Chamber of Commerce, a blogger, maybe a traveler, you know what I mean? Something like that would show you in your own state. So look up Amish or Mennonite in, say, Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia, New York State, California, where there's not any, to my knowledge, or at least any Amish. So that's going to give you an indication, kind of, if there is any in your state. Sometimes you might find out from another list, like from my friend Eric Westner of Amish America. He might have a listicle, or basically an article that's in a list of states that do not have any Amish. Okay, so you can say, oh, that might be why I can't find any in California. There's not any unless somebody's taking a vacation to see something, which is perfectly fine. But that doesn't mean there's a community. It just happens to be there's an individual. See, just visiting, for example. So that's going to give you kind of an example of how you can find one on Google search. Some of these are in the Google search might bring back a PDF. Of course, Elizabethton College is going to be very, very good for this. They have a state-by-state map. It has the year of, I guess, whatever they started, whenever they're founded, and they become a community, from that point on. So basically the older ones typically be larger, so it's a little easier to visit those particular ones, all that sort of thing. But you'll see the year that they had been founded, a little bit about how big they are, how many church districts, all that sort of thing. Population, That's going to give you an indication of size, all that sort of thing. Like I said, the bigger they are, the easier they are to visit, as long as they're a certain kind of Amish community that can typically facilitate visitors. Because most of them will, okay, to some degree. Some of them are a little more friendly than others. I know that the Etheridge community happens to be where I'm at. So it's what Eric Westner called his second favorite of all of the communities he's visited. So next to only Holmes County, Ohio, which is technically where the Etheridge community came out of. So I guess it's kind of easy to say that it might be that since Holmes County, Ohio kind of was famous for Sam E. Yoder, and yet that Yoder faction, whenever he died, kind of got taken over by Samuel Swartzentruber. So that's why you'll see the Swartzentruber Amish delineation from the other just straight up, normal older Amish. And that's going to kind of give you an indication on what kind of community. So a lot of times if you could find a PDF, it might not always list this. And that's why Google searches on things like forums and other websites might give you that information. Say, for example, you're looking for a good community in a state. You find that there is Amish there, but you might not know what kind. Sometimes the more, I guess what some people would call the more liberal orders, are actually more closed to visitors. It's strange how that works out. But most of the Swartzentruber Amish, since they have the least amount of technology, they're very friendly towards visitation. Why is this? They put little signs out by the road and everything else trying to get you to come to their home-based businesses. Some of the communities, they don't really do that. They basically work for, a lot of times, large Mennonites. They'll have a whole building full of something that's being built, and they're going to work there and then basically become Amish, like we would see it, back at their homes, where if you just went inside the warehouse or the building site, they would look like just country people, you know what I mean? So sometimes finding a good community is going to be a little bit more difficult if all you're seeing is a Google search and a PDF listing information. So finding these forums, sometimes you can see that other people are having the conversation. So, for example, you find a social media page like mine or Eric's or some of the other ones that talk about the Amish of a particular place or have a particular place that they're writing about. We're going to kind of tell people, look, this is a really good community to visit because of, and we'll talk about the vegetable stands, and they got maybe something like a plowboy auction, like we have here, or some kind of auction that they have a bunch of produce, they invite a bunch of English, and they're very friendly. Or, for example, there's some places here in Tennessee where they're primarily just builders. They don't want to really mess with anybody on the outside. If you know anything about the kingdom Christians, how they have a two kingdoms approach. And if that's new to you and you don't understand any of this, that's where things like books and such is going to come in. A book from somebody like Donald Craybill is going to be able to explain that to you. And he might even explain in the book different communities so you can sort of find it. Oh, okay, that's in here. You can also maybe search for Amish furniture, Amish, bedroom furniture near me, or something in a Google map, okay? Google Maps is really good about taking a certain area and then putting in Amish near me. And it'll say something like, search this area. You click that and it'll sort of widen out. Now keep in mind, not everything that says Amish or Mennonite or Plain or Swiss or something that kind of tells you something that's sort of Amish or Mennonite, basically Anabaptist adjacent. Not everything that it says is actually Amish. Just about everything that uses the word like Amish market is not Amish at all. You know what I mean? Like if I had a place that sold lawnmowers, and my name is Mike, obviously, and I put Mike's English Lawnmowers, that would be like, why are you doing that? You know, it's just telling you what you are. So they don't really see using Amish in the name of something is usually a good idea most of the time. Now, you might find some exceptions out there, don't get me wrong, but most of the time you'll find Amish something owned by the English in hopes that you see the Amish name and then come running. So, you know, be that what it may. But whenever you do find it on that map app, if you will, you can also look into it and say, okay, is this owned by the Amish or Mennonite? So you can kind of look up that store and say, is this store, you know, or this fill in the blank of the name, and actually a Amish or Mennonite store? And then sometimes they might have an Amish or Mennonite beginnings, but they kind of left that a long time ago. They just kind of kept the name the same. So that also happens. So let's presuppose a few things, okay? So how do you know what roads they live on? Of course, Google Maps, Google Earth, by zooming in. So let's presuppose now that you found a place. You looked up Amish in my state or Mennonite in my state, enter, or search this area, and it shows up. Because a lot of times if they have a furniture store or something like that they do, or a casket manufacturer, they kind of have to carry it's almost like a doing business as with the county, because they're technically a shop at that point, that's part of their business. And if you have a business license to do business with another place, then you kind of have to have some paperwork. So there's usually a listing. And we're going to talk about that too. So if you do find that listing goes back to an address, okay? So you find that particular person on usually a Google listing. Like we have several here in Etheridge that have, let's just continue with the caskets, okay? Just for an example. I'm not singling anybody out. I'm reading this. I'm just talking as if you were in front of me, okay, friends? All right, now, so if we take the casket guys and we say, all right, most of these have a Google listing so that other people who need a casket will go buy them, all right? So they have to have a way that the English know they're out there, okay? So you'll find that sometimes they'll have a tin shop, or they'll have a honey, like a bee supply or something like that. You see what I'm getting at? And you can say find it on the Google map and then just sort of scroll. Well, I got a phone right here. You sort of scroll in by pinching and doing your fingers out until it sort of zeroes in. Now, if you're on a computer, this is extremely easy. You can sort of hold down the side of your trackpad and zoom in. Now, if you've got a mouse, a regular mouse, you can sort of click and zoom in, depending on if you're a Mac or a Windows person. I'm going to assume that you know how to run the zoom feature inside of maps. Now, if it looks like an Amish home, you know what I mean? You're probably a good reference, if you will, of seeing that this is a plain person home. Typically, I know in the Amish community it can vary. I know the Mennonite community can vary wildly. They pretty much live in homes like ours. But I'm gonna also kind of guess that you're wanting to find an Amish community, so you're gonna find an Amish-looking home. Just about every time you'll see either a red workshop that they're living out of until they could build the white house, and you'll find that sort of signature. The white house is basically so sun can reflect off of it. You'll learn a lot more about this when it comes to my Amish of Etheridge course. So basically, it's a lot easier to heat them than it is to cool them down. And most of the time, they'll have a basement or cellar or something to keep vegetable soup and such, you know, as a kind of a pantry, so it'll stay cool, all right? So that's kind of a good way for them to kind of prolong their for the shelf life of their foods, as well as keep cool when it's like 107 outside during the summer. So anyway, you're going to see this home, and it's going to sort of spark something in you. That is not a normal, you would say, English home. This is obviously a Amish home. Now, not every time can you move the little man or little yellow figure that shows you can sort of drop him down for a street view. That's not always the case when it comes to some of these back roads. So sometimes you might have to go to Google Earth. Now, if you've taken my Plainest, Tennessee road trip course, I'm even wearing the kind of outfit and green screen and stuff that I use in that particular course, then you know all about this. They're part of our tools. We kind of go through the tools. But on Google Earth, you can kind of move in ways that Google Maps won't let you, okay? And then you can say, aha, this is an Amish house. I recognize that as being an Amish house. Now, if you really want to know past that, you have a particular place that you think may or may not be an Amish house, or maybe conservative Mennonite house or something like that, because I want to kind of explain how sometimes it's almost impossible to tell the Amish from the Mennonite, because there's really old order Mennonite that are actually sometimes more conservative than the Swartz and Truber Amish when it comes to technology. And it's really hard to tell one from another, but you can usually go on the state assessment page if your state has one. Okay, now this is going to depend on where you are, where you're listening to me. I guess it's the same time with the country, because obviously I'm talking about the United States. It's the only place I call home. So in Tennessee, it happens to be that we have a state assessment page where you can look up who owns what division of land. Now, if you're interested in another state that might not have these, you might have to just look at your county group, basically go downtown to wherever your county building is, and this is usually where wherever the county meetings and such are. This is where you're going to get tags for your car, stuff like that. And they might be able to tell you who owns the land or the house or something. So if you look up on your state assessment page and you have names like Yoder, Stoltzfus, Byler, Zook, Chirac, Hostetler, all that sort of thing, because a lot of times this will also be on their mailbox. So when you go in person and you've sort of already associated a place where you think might have an Amish home on it, you can look at their mailbox personally, but when you're on Google Earth or Google Maps, you can't just look at a mailbox. So the Tennessee assessment page will kind of tell you who owns that land, and if it's got a very Amish-y type name. Now keep in mind, there's probably some that don't have an Amish name, and then there's some that can go all over, like Miller. If you got a last name like Miller, it can go either way. Whether or not you're an English or an Amish or an ex-Amish or your dad was Amish, or Mennonite. Some Mennonites are named Miller. So when it comes to those kind of things, you can kind of tell, all right? That's going to get you an idea as far as what street. Now, if they're part of any kind of old order system, you'll start seeing other homes around them. The Amish don't have a church like the Mennonite do. They will have a home church. That means everybody in that church district will usually have to live somewhat close by. They don't really do this for communal living. They do it for fellowship. Okay? So they need people to kind of be close to them in order to make it to church. If somebody lives, 45 miles away, well, that's a day long in the back of a, with a horse and buggy. So they need you to be like 4 or 5 miles max, in order to be in that church district. So whenever you find a home, you'll start looking around and you'll start finding other ones. Kind of put on your little investigator glasses, a little hat, I don't know if you need to do that, but you know what I'm saying. So that's going to give you an idea where it is. So let's start off with the recap. All right. So first we're going to go to Google. We're going to Google Amish or Mennonite in my state, whatever state you're in hopes that you can get a return back on some kind of list that's going to tell you a little bit more about your state and the plain groups that might live in it or might have moved out of it. Now keep in mind, if you live close to the border of another state, look in that state too. It just happens to be like where I'm at in Tennessee, above us is even more Amish and Mennonite than Tennessee and Kentucky. At the same time, in Mississippi, the Pontotoc region has a Amish Schwarzentrooper community in there. So if you were in Alabama, where there is no Amish, but there's 3 or 4 different versions of Mennonite that live here, somebody can go over to Mississippi or up to Tennessee. Get what I'm saying? So even if there's not one in your state specifically, there might be one in your neighboring state. Now, if you're flying in anywhere, sometimes your group travel will, like a bus or something, will go nearby one, and you can sort of plan a day trip if you have time. So that's what we're trying to do with the Google search. We're going to try to find some kind of list where this is mentioned in hope that search engine optimization or SEO, I guess I might as well talk about the GEO or generative for Chat GPT and those guys since they're coming on strong, picks up on a sentence somebody like me says, okay, that I have a resource. So the next thing you want to find is that PDF or that list. Sometimes colleges, all that sort of thing will come up with them. We're just recapping, okay? Forums and websites, stuff that we would own that we start mentioning about the Amish or Mennonite communities or stores, for example, that are nearby. That's going to give you an indication. Now, the rest of this is going to be on Google Maps. Remember, I said go look up an area. Just pull up something, kind of scroll to where it's just the size of Tennessee. Put in Amish and Mennonite in my area, and it'll say something. I have no idea what version of Google Map or Apple Map or whatever map app you might have, where you click something along the line of search this area in hopes that it shows you all the different ones. Also, if you're really looking for the Mennonite people, let me mention those in this recap. They'll usually have a church that is on Google. The Mennonite are a lot more gospel oriented. They're going to give you tracts. They're going to give you a little bit more of that message, if you will. So they put all their churches on Google so that people can find them. So you can find a Mennonite church in that area, and of course they'll have Mennonite people. Some of those Mennonite people will usually have a store. Now keep in mind, most of the Mennonite, especially from what we would call car driving or black bumper Mennonite towards the more progressive end, are not interested in you coming to their home. Yeah, they're not going to be very excited if you pull up and say, "Where's the corn?" Okay, because today's modern Mennonite is not going to be doing something the same as, say, the Amish community, where they have a home-based business. They'll put signs out front, all that sort of thing. Now, as you go towards the more conservative Mennonite groups that do have the horse and buggy, they kind of the older order, all the way to the most conservative, they will have horse and buggy. They will have the beards on the men, the dresses on the ladies, and all that sort of thing, the cap, and they will look, very well like a plain person. Plain is their word, okay? So that's going to give you an indication kind of what you're getting into, where you can find these forums and websites where people like me are talking about them, or somebody that just says, "Hey, I found this place and they had some people with the gowns and the hat and the prayer covering," and you're going to say, "Okay, that's most likely an Amish or a Mennonite." So that's going to give you an idea that they're in that area. And remember, like I said, go on to the once you kind of find an area, get on Google Maps, start scrolling around, seeing if you can't find an Amish or a Mennonite home. They usually have big gardens. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Not everybody has, room for 7 or 8 acres of gardening. You know what I mean? So that's going to give you an idea of you're in the right spot. And then you could look through the assessment page if your state allows for one, where you can find names like Yoder, Byler, Stoltzfus, Chirac, Zook, Hostetler, all these guys. And that's going to give you an idea that they're most likely a plain person. Then start looking around. So I hope this helps everybody. If it turns out that this is really neat to you and you are on YouTube and you're like, all right, now tell me a little bit more about this course. All right, now at the moment I do have 2 courses. The Plainest Tennessee Road Trip, which is all about taking a road trip. I mean, from concept to coming home, okay? Everything. I don't even know how long, 30-something hours I talk about that. And then, of course, my other course is called The Complete Guide to Visiting the Amish of Etheridge. And if you're thinking, well, I don't know, I'm not going to visit Etheridge. I'm going to visit, fill in the blank place. That one's a really good course to use kind of as a template. So even if you're going to, I don't know, in Missouri and Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Pennsylvania, it's hard to get it wrong in Pennsylvania. That's going to be a good template for you to use no matter what Amish community that you're visiting. Now, if you're looking for a Mennonite community that you'd like to visit, that's where the Plainest Tennessee Road Trip course is good, because I do have both Amish and Mennonite. I love them both. So that's where I kind of cover the Mennonite over on my Plainest Tennessee Road Trip course, because there are differences, and the way they kind of perceive things and they go about sort of the application of that life is kind of done a little different, okay, in the Mennonite distinction. So when it comes to that sort of thing, be sure to check those courses out. I'll try to link both of them just below here to the guys here on YouTube. Now, obviously, if you're part of our course, no problem. You've already bought it. I love you guys. You guys are going to go on to the next lesson, or at least the next video, okay? Because I like these little interchanges that I can do with the greater audiences, because I don't want there to be a financial barrier. But keep in mind, if you're part of the course group, you paid for the good stuff, so you're going to move on to even more lessons than this one. So hopefully I will see you guys in that next lesson. For you guys on YouTube, hopefully I'll see you in another video just like this one.